The age of exploration. So what's interesting is that, what promoted this age of exploration? Well, this desire to find new trade routes, right? And as we discussed in class, there's this idea of God, gold, glory. But this is sense that overseas, you can find better trade routes and therefore replace these expensive middlemen, these merchants that are trading these things. So you can find a lot of fortune if you find a better way to trade. And the second question is not just what promoted it, but how does it affect different regions, as well as European society and economics. And this is really where it's sort of a profound thing. We're going to see a shift in the European balance of power towards those areas along the coast, because all of a sudden they'll have the best trade routes, not the ones inland like Italy and Germany, which were the old center, but now it will cede to the west coast, the Dutch, England, Spain, and France. But also, how does it affect European society? What we're going to see in the aftermath of this, introduction of new food items, which will mean a larger population, so population growth. As a result of that, we're going to see what some people call the price revolution, or an inflation in prices. And therefore, a commercial revolution, more commerce will begin to happen. So those are societal and economic effects. And also, there's an intellectual effect to the opening of the Atlantic, right? Exposure to new cultures is going to expose philosophers and thinkers to all sorts of new ideas, right? Many people will look at, for example, Montaigne, the skeptic philosopher, will say, well, how do we know the cannibalism in that culture that we encounter is bad, right? That's just what they do, and we do what we do. Thomas More will surmise about how in this other world there might be an ideal system, and maybe maybe the European way of doing things is not the best way. Maybe there's in fact some other ideal out there. And obviously Thomas More's not saying that they're actually going to find that, but he's using that sense that there could be something different, inspired by these other cultures that they find, to surmise about how Europe herself could be different. So there is sort of a socioeconomic, cultural, intellectual impact, in addition to obviously the trade and the political change. Okay, Prince Henry the Navigator is the Portuguese prince, very interested in navigation. He'll, work on better sails, and his ships will go farther. See you later. The Portuguese will make the first major gains. Vasco da Gama will be the first Portuguese and European to sail to India, and so he will get there in 1498, I believe. And so that's around the Horn of Africa and all the way up to India. He, of course, goes there the first time, and he comes back the second time with a lot of guns and troops, and actually, fires on this territory, creates a big Portuguese colony there, and the beginning of sort of these mercantile colonies that are created along the coasts of Africa and India, and all the way to the Spice Isles in the East Indies, or modern-day Indonesia. Of course, Columbus thinks that he's got this amazing theory to go west in order to go east, and so Columbus hits the New World, and this sets off what's known as the Columbian Exchange. And the Columbian Exchange is not triangle trade. The Columbian Exchange is basically the exchange of items, of animal species, plant species, and other bacteria or other diseases. It's the exchange of those species between the two continents, between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. So, for example, horses or cows had never existed in the Western Hemisphere, as had not malaria and smallpox and other diseases. And in the Eastern Hemisphere, things like potatoes or tomatoes or corn had never existed. One interesting thing, and this gets students confused often, is sugar had never existed in the Western Hemisphere. But the Europeans bring sugar across, and it grows really well. in those Caribbean islands, in what's known as the West Indies, because Columbus, of course, thinks it's India, so it's the West Indies. So that's the Columbian Exchange is the movement of items, sugar and diseases and animals and other plants to the New World, and the movement of species, plant species like corn and especially the potato to the Old World. Magellan is the first person to circumnavigate the world. Well, he himself doesn't make it, but his crew does. Yes, this is confirmation that the world is round, but we had not long known that. Obviously, the Greeks had known that, because the sun has to go around us somehow. But that's an amazing accomplishment, and many historians might disagree. I mean, there's some people that think the Chinese had gone around the world, right? And there's some different theories about this. But the key thing is that Columbus's discovery of the New World and Magellan's circumnavigation of the world will herald a new era of European dominance of the world. If the Chinese or other historic or ancient peoples had gone around the world, it didn't have that same impact that this did. And so this era means is that what we're going to see is the Europeans are going to begin to control global trade. They'll supplant the Arab merchants that used to have these long supply lines across Central Asia. And the Europeans will begin to get involved in the trade in Asia, and obviously will begin setting up an entire new economy in the New World. Now, the Native American population will be destroyed largely as a result of diseases and, of course, violence from the European conquerors, who are known as Conquistadores. Cortez, of course, conquers the Aztecs, and Pizarro conquers the Incans. These are the two most developed civilizations of the New World, and both are defeated quite quickly. The Spanish then will create this large empire in the New World. They will begin to mix with native inhabitants, creating sort of a new race of mestizos, people of mixed racial ancestry between Native American and Europeans. And those Spanish, those European bloods, will be the dominant group, and then the mestizos will be sort of the majority, and then the Native American population will be, of course, the weakest and the most poor. The Potosi silver mines will be the sources of large colonial wealth, large silver wealth that will go back to Spain on the Spanish Main. The Potosi mines are in Peru. And so this is going to herald a new era of piracy, and so all those Pirates of the Caribbean movies and stuff. This is, of course, as a result of this whole new world being created, and of course the chaos and disorder of creating new towns and cities in these areas. Now, the encomienda is going to be basically, it's going to, in theory, protect the Native Americans. It's going to say that, the Spanish can't do whatever they want with Native Americans. But it's going to authorize the Native Americans to be treated like serfs. And so what we'll see in the New World is that we'll have sort of the creation of a European-style society with your nobles and your landlords, and then your large peasant or serf population that's working for them. The Portuguese will also be creating this army, or an empire. The Portuguese will control Brazil, and so therefore will be involved in the production of sugar in Brazil, the large plantations there, and so therefore will take a huge role, like the Spanish, in the Atlantic slave trade. And the Portuguese will also have colonies in the Far East, right? They'll be the initial ones, beginning with the Gama, that have colonies in Africa, around the coast of Africa, around the coast of India, into the Spice Islands of Indonesia.